Today I'm going to talk about enhancing student experiences with accessible VR. My name is Nat Nickel. I work for the Multimodal Education Center at Central Washington University. We're located in Ellensburg, Washington, center of the state. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where I work. I'm going to talk to you a lot about my personal experiences with VR. And then I'm going to try and bring it all together in a way that makes sense for you and how you could possibly use this. So I will have a point. It's going to be at the end. Okay, so Multimodal Education Center. So we embrace the vision that technology empowers learning. We provide instructional and multimedia technologies, support and training for all CWU students, faculty, and staff. Our goal is to create opportunities for exploration of emerging technologies, digital media, and innovative learning spaces. So you can see we've got 3D printers. We also have a laser cutter, paper cutting, and a CNC router. So that's one of our labs is a creator space. We also have active learning classrooms that can be arranged in a variety of ways. Right now, one of our active learning classrooms is set up as a VR lab. It's probably not going to stay this way. Hopefully we're going to get a permanent VR space. I'm not sure yet, but right now that's how we're using this. In the photo here, you can see this is an instructor shows a day to bring his students into the lab. I think this is a math class, and they're using a data visualization software, so they can go in a 3D space, punch in some numbers, and then manipulate charts and graphs in a 3D environment. Okay, so we're funded. A lot of our equipment comes from the student tech fee. So students pay a fee it's a flat fee every quarter. And we go to the student tech fee and we basically say, hey, we think these new toys would be really cool for students. And then there's a council that will approve or deny based on if they think it's a good idea. It's students, faculty, administration, yeah. Okay, so we try to be department agnostic. And so we check out equipment also. We have recording studios and we do lecture capture. So if a student needs to check out a laptop or a camera, gear like that, they can come check it out from us. So it's really easy to justify purchasing a fancy cinema camera if you're looking at it from the perspective of a film student, right? But how can other departments use something like that? Is that really a worthwhile investment if you're trying to be department agnostic? So with VR, obviously somebody in the computer science department would be really interested, right? But if you're a teacher, how can you use VR? Okay, so I'm just going to talk to you about some things that I've done with VR, and then at the end of that, I'll try and have it make sense in a department agnostic way. About December of 2017, I started using an Oculus Rift at home. I'm a gamer. I think virtual reality is amazing. I think the level of immersion is beyond anything I've experienced before. I think what's really cool about current VR is the motion controls. It's one thing to be able to see depth, that's great, and have head tracking and be able to look in a direction and see whatever you want to see. But to be able to interact in 3D, I think that's what really sells it for me. When I started using an Oculus Rift, I basically blew through everything on the App Store. I was pretty obsessed with it, but I found that a lot of the experiences were sort of fun for a day, and then I was done with it. Until, let's see, sorry, I was just going to mention that Google Earth is really popular. That's something that mostly, when we have students come in just to try out VR, this is the first thing that we show them, because has anybody tried Google Earth in VR? Okay, it's amazing. It's like, what a time to be alive. Okay. When I discovered this game, it's called VR Chat. Has anybody seen VR Chat? You familiar with it? Okay. So this is the game that I got really obsessed with, that I just put hundreds of hours into. So VR Chat almost isn't really a game. It can be, but I think it's better described as an online social experience. So players are represented by avatars. So it's like your virtual identity, right? And these avatars can be almost anything you can imagine. So what's really cool about VR Chat is that all the content is user created. So everything you experience is going to be created by another player. It's, yeah, you could compare it to Second Life, definitely. So the 3D, not just the characters, but the 3D spaces that you encounter are going to be created by other players. And when you're in this game, you can go to different worlds and you can create new instances of them. So say this room was a world someone created in VR Chat. I could create a new instance, and it would be an empty room, and I could invite whoever I wanted to be in that same room. VR Chat fully takes control, or fully utilizes motion controls. So as you're represented as this virtual player, you can walk right up to someone, wave at them, shake their hand, give them a thumbs up. So body language is a big part of this. I think that's what makes this so immersive. Okay, so this is just some video capture that I did playing the game. This is sort of like a comedy club that someone's created, and you can see there's all sorts of funny characters around. It is. So that's, you know, me waving to this guy. And this is another sort of open mic night in a bar. I'm driving around as the Ecto 1 right now. VR Chat can get extremely weird. That's not really. This is a virtual presentation room. There's a lot of people in here right now, but it's got this 3D pen you can walk around. So you, in an education context, you could actually give a presentation like I'm giving right now in VR Chat. So when I said it's not a game, but it can be, someone has created a kart racing level. And it's really cool because it's in 3D and you've got this sense of depth and you can race other players. And here's an example where someone's created a virtual bowling alley. And the bowling alley also has food you can eat. This is an example, since we're in Vegas. These players, oh, well, now we're on the moon. Sorry, I didn't know how long it was going to take me to say some of this stuff. But these are just examples of worlds that people have created. This one has low gravity, so when you jump, you don't come back to the ground as quickly. Somebody's created beer pong in a nightclub. And you can see that there's a sort of simple but simulated physics. The ball drops and bounces. The dice roll. Okay. It reminds me a lot of Comic-Con. Everybody's masquerading as a superhero or a fantasy character. Okay, so after you play this game for a while, typically the first thing people want to do is create their own avatar. Avatars. You go in and it'll just be a room full of avatar podiums that you can reach out and touch and you become that character. But most people will eventually want to create their own based on whatever they're into. So when I started, this is the avatar selection screen. When I started, the first thing I made was superheroes from my childhood. So here I'm Nightcrawler. And I'm looking into a mirror so you can see what you look like when you move around. Now I'm Spider-Man. And you can also see my hands are gesturing. I can point and I can give a thumbs up. Okay, now I'm the Green Power Ranger. And what's really cool about the gestures is you can actually reassign them to do different stuff. Like here, for example, when I squeeze my fist, a sword appears. Some of the other superheroes I've made can shoot lasers when you do a gesture with your hands, stuff like that. Okay, so when you want to get started making your own avatar, you're going to need a 3D model of a character. There's a lot of different places to come up with that. People typically steal their 3D models from video games. So a website like this, Models Resource, sort of a repository where people have ripped 3D models out of a game and uploaded them here. Whoops. So the next thing you do once you've got a 3D model of a person, we put it in Blender, and Blender is a free 3D modeling software. Also, VRChat is a free game. There's no cost involved. You put your 3D model in Blender, and Blender is basically just to optimize the model and prepare it for VRChat. So, for example, the VRChat SDK wants your character to have a certain bone structure within the model, because that's what it uses to know how to move your character when you move. So that's what the bones look like in the 3D modeling software. Okay, that's just where you go to get the SDK, stands for Software Development Kit. Okay. VRChat is built on Unity. Has anybody ever used Unity before? Okay, cool. So Unity is a 3D, basically game development engine. So you can see here, I've got the model imported into Unity with my VRChat SDK, and it's mapping every bone to basically the avatar creation system. I'm sorry? Not necessarily. If you have a model that's already basically prepared in a way that works with Unity and the VRChat SDK, then you won't have to use Blender. Blender is just sort of a way to edit that model and prepare it for this. And You can even program the bones in your fingers. And this is just an example of, I'm just playing with some of the parameters and how you can make the character move to make sure that I've got the bones mapped correctly. Okay. Once I, whoa, what are we doing here? Something's wrong. Once I moved on from superheroes, I went to my next favorite thing, which is Pokemon. Has everybody played Pokemon? Probably not everyone, but familiar with Pokemon at least. It's a pretty popular franchise. These games were my favorites. They came out in 1998. I was a little bit younger back then. I was pretty obsessed with these. And I think the rest of the world got pretty obsessed with Pokemon as well. And I think it's stayed relevant ever since. You know, one of the problems with Pokemon back then is the hardware we were playing on definitely left something to be desired. I mean, at least by today's standards. It was cool back then, but the graphics capability of a handheld system back then were pretty limited. If you're not familiar with Pokemon, basically it's a game about capturing monsters and making them fight. For me, I think what I really liked about Pokemon was just a sense of exploration. So in 1998, this was how they represented a forest, for example. It was kind of like a maze. The entire game is contained in a map this size. So it's a little hard to see, but this is an entire city. Okay. So it's 2019. What are we playing Pokemon on today? Does anybody have a Nintendo Switch? All right, one person, great. No, that's awesome. So this is a really cool device, especially as a handheld device. If you grew up on something like a Game Boy, this is amazing. The Pokemon games that are out on the Switch right now are actually remakes of the originals, Red and Blue. So since those are my favorite, I'm pretty pleased. The graphics have come a long way, considering this is the same game I just showed you with black and white graphics. Has anybody played Pokemon Go on their phone? Okay. So when these games were announced, my first thought was not to be excited about a remake necessarily on the Switch, but I was excited to get my hands on the 3D assets because I knew I was going to be able to steal all of those graphics and use them in VR. So that's exactly what I did. I downloaded every 3D asset from the game and I rebuilt the entire world in Unity. I'd say in this Pokemon world specifically, I probably put over 100 hours into it. All the white lines you're seeing are objects that are connected with each other and they interact with each other. So for example, when you walk into a door, it teleports you somewhere else because there's a separate 3D model for the room contained on the other side of that door. It's also set up so as you enter a new area, the music changes. And it also has to tell the music in other areas to stop playing. So that's kind of what you're seeing with all the lines everywhere, kind of networked together. So this is that original map that the game is contained in, and it's basically represented in an almost identical way here. It's kind of hard to see in Unity, but the structure is the same. Okay. So what I was going to say about the Switch and why, while I'm glad that there's new Pokemon games, after playing something like VR, it leaves a little something to be desired for me. I sort of want more out of it. Even though the graphics are better, I'm still just looking at a flat screen. I'm experiencing the world through a small window, right? I want to be in that world. I want to walk around, reach out and touch that world. So this is the perspective of the player in the Pokemon world that I've created. So again, when you walk through a door, that actually teleported you somewhere entirely different. We've got the Pokemon themselves, and we were also able to rip their animations from the game and incorporate animations into this. Right, right. And I thought about turning off jumping in this world, but it's frustrating to navigate when you can't jump. Let's see. So basically, within VR chat, there's what's called triggers. And the really cool thing, and this is really important, I don't know how to program. I don't know how to write code. And I was able to create a sort of interactive experience with zero coding. The VR Chat SDK allows you to put triggers on almost any object, and so then those objects become interactable in a variety of different ways. By the way, this is that same forest that I showed you earlier. One way you can interact with an object is by picking it up, and another way you can interact with an object is just by walking into it. A lot of objects that you're seeing right now have colliders that I had to go in and say, this is a solid object, I don't want to be able to walk through it. But you can walk through stuff. There's a lot of invisible stuff that you can walk through that will trigger something else to happen. Like I said, changing the music, for example. I basically have an invisible box, and when you walk into it, now you hear certain music. Also, the doors you saw, when somebody enters a door or a cave, that triggers the teleportation function. Later on, I'll show you how you can trigger animations. So I'm just going to skip ahead. Okay, so part of ripping the Pokemon assets was ripping the characters themselves, right? This was just a test world I did with a bunch of different characters. I don't have any animations applied on this. But this is important because the next thing I'm going to talk about is the avatar world that we created. As I said earlier, people want to use whatever character they can come up with to represent themselves. Okay, this is a Pokemon Stadium that we created. Here you can actually see the Pokeballs simulated with physics. It rolls on the ground. You can throw it. It's got velocity. These boxes are triggering animations, so it's like giving it a command. You can also just click the Pokemon themselves and they will do an animation. That's an actual player using Pokemon as their avatar. Here I'm swapping out Pokemon on the battlefield. So notice the TV screens. There's a function in the SDK for TV screens, and I've got invisible cameras set up around the battlefield that are talking to those screens and switching between them. Now, I built a team of people to help me with this. 16-year-old kid from Florida, a man from Germany, and a woman from the United Kingdom. Together we made over 500 of these avatars, and that's using their unique animations from the games. So when you walk, it moves the way the Pokemon would actually walk, not just the generic human motion. There's been a number of generations of Pokemon games over the years. I think we've got 5 or 6 generations represented here, so you can enter the world, click the game, and those Pokemon will be represented around you to choose from. Okay, so what is my point with all this? Do I think Nintendo would be happy about what I'm doing? Probably not. I don't want to encourage students to steal assets to create content. My point is, I really wanted to have an experience, which is to walk around in the Pokemon world. And I don't know how long it's going to take Nintendo to make that happen, so I just made it happen myself. With that being said, my goal for students and faculty is to be able to create the experiences that they would like to have and be able to do it in a way where they don't have to know how to program to create an interactive experience. Okay, so if you're not going to steal assets from a video game, where are you going to get your assets? There are many resources online for free 3D models. The student tech fee at Central Washington bought us a 3D scanner. What that allows us to do is take real world objects and turn them into virtual assets. I don't have a very good capture of this, but this is a dinosaur skull that we 3D printed. So to 3D print it, to be honest with you, we already had the 3D model. But just for the sake of the presentation, pretend that this was a real skull. I did scan the 3D print, and I got this, and I put it into VR chat as an asset to play with. Also, that's my boss's head that we 3D scan. Okay. So what I'm envisioning going forward is a VR lab where students can come in, sit down with Unity, scan whatever assets they want to scan, create a world or a space, and put assets in that space to interact with. Second part of that is collaboration and interacting with other students. This platform was great for me in working with my team creating our Pokemon world, because we were across the world from each other, but I could still walk right up to them and have a conversation with them in a VR space. I find that to be a lot more immersive than a Skype call. And not to dig in too deep to the psychology of VR chat, but I actually found it really fascinating. The friends that I made in this game were really unexpected, because you're all sort of anonymous. You don't really know who's on the other end of that, but there's also a safety in that. You're not going to just walk up to every person you see and say, hey, who are you? What are you about? You know, you're nervous, you're shy, and it's not necessarily a safe thing to do all the time, right? But in VR, nobody can hurt you. I mean, you can just walk away, you can leave, you can go to a different world instantly. You can block a user. If I don't like this person, I can hit a button and they disappear from me, right? And they're gone. There are virtual courtrooms, there are virtual movie theaters. Imagine teaching a law and justice class and having a mock trial in a virtual courtroom. You don't have to go anywhere, and yet everybody can play that part, be that character. Our goal is to start creating repositories of assets for the university. So say the biology department has a skeleton they'd like their students to get their hands on, but not necessarily handle. So we'd scan it, we'd put it in a virtual room, and you could, depending on how many headsets were available to you, teach a class in that virtual room with those virtual assets. The other thing that's cool about VR Chat is it's not exclusive to VR, so any desktop user can use it and play it in 2D. You don't have the motion controls, but it allows for a much larger user base. Do you have any questions so far? No questions. Okay. Yeah. This is all still relatively new, and we're still building our VR presence. I definitely think some departments are going to be more interested than others. I think it's sort of our job to find a way to make it accessible to everyone. You know, like I said, I think for biology this is going to be huge. But I think honestly there's room for psychology experiments. I mean, in this game, people are, and it doesn't have to be limited to this game, by the way. This is just one software development kit that's available for VR. There are others that are sort of more standardized and not about this specific game. I just found this to be an extremely easy way to create the experiences. As I was saying, when you walk up to somebody, you don't know who they are on the other end. So I ended up becoming friends with people that I never would have known otherwise. Because maybe I would have been intimidated by that person, or I just didn't see myself connecting with that person. I think people studying to become teachers, this could be a really effective tool for teaching a virtual class, simulating that experience before they're out doing their student teaching. But my hope is that students and faculty will see this and they will be inspired and they will come up with, I don't feel like I'm going to be able to come up with an experience for each student. I want them to be inspired to come up with their own experiences that they want to make, and I want to be the one to help them make it. Yes?
So I kind of tertiary of the 3D stuff. I like the virtual world.
Sure. Sure.
And kind of bringing that video game element. One of the things they're talking about is video game called Fast and in one of the series of it, they actually went to Notre Dame. You can scale Notre Dame inside down. You can climb on everything. And they're actually already looking at that video game and the 3D aspect of it in the reconstruction of the video game. So I mean that was within 24 to 48 hours of that happened. They were bringing in the research and all of the stuff that at my alma mater at Penn State, we have an art instructor who, not everybody can go trans and go to these things. But Google is on Google Earth and scope the inside of all of us and you can go see Mona Lisa using VR. And then you have to fly to Paris and spend money, and you have people who wouldn't have that access. Now it's like,
right.
Just by buying it.
I think this week we're having a professor teach a class on France, and they're doing something very similar, putting kids in VR and having them experience stuff without actually being there. Now what's cool about that Assassin's Creed game and their 3D model of Notre Dame, I could rip that, put that in this, and in a week have students experiencing Notre Dame in a 3D space without having to go there. I don't know that we have the capacity at this point to teach a class inside that 3D space. I think that would be amazing to have the instructor giving a tour. But I could certainly see at this point in time, maybe an extra credit assignment. Stop by the VR lab, load up this world, you know, write a page about what you thought, what you saw, what you felt. Yeah. Exclusive? So when you create an instance of a world, you can set the privacy. So you can make it invite only, or friends only, or friends of friends. So yeah, you can tailor that experience, because I'll be honest with you, there is a lot of weird stuff in that game. There's no censorship, really. So if you were going to teach a class in an environment like that, you would absolutely want to make sure it was private. So my understanding of instances is once the last person leaves, it shuts down, right? So if you were to start a class, first thing you would do is create an instance, and then you would either say, here's the number of the instance to join, or you would just maybe have your students on your friends list, which could be a headache, but and you would just invite those users in. You use it while you need it, and then it's gone, right? Also, so like our Pokemon world is public. Anybody can go out right now and create their instance and experience it, but you don't necessarily have to publish your worlds to be open to the public. When you're in Unity, you can just do like a test run of it, and so it doesn't upload it to the server, it just builds it locally, but you can still invite other players to see it. Any other questions? Okay, thanks a lot. You know, what's cool about my job is I don't think it even existed 5 years ago. And when I found out there was a opportunity to use VR, I was pretty excited about that. 'Cause I really hated my job before I worked at Central.